Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of TNTT Truth Not Trash with Tim. We're still working on our special series on the Constitution. We're on episode 10. Very exciting. We are going to get into the Bill of Rights today. And so, what a lot of people, if you ask people what the Constitution talks about, the first thing they think about, either the first or the second thing they think about, is either the right to bear arms or the freedom of speech, right? And we hear a lot about that right now, and as we should. But that wasn't part of the original Constitution. It's all something that we've been led to believe is the Constitution, and it is the Constitution. It was an amendment two added to, so it's part of the Constitution, but it wasn't part of the original Constitution. What happened was they knew they had to get something in place to form this union, to keep this union together, and they knew they'd have to amend that relatively quick, and it actually only took them 3 years to put this in place. So once again, my name's Tim. I am your humble host. Once again, I never claim to be an expert at this stuff. I'm just like you. I pick up the books, I read them. I don't go get some overpriced education that tells me some specific instructor's ideology or some institution's ideology. I read the text as it's written, and I determine as an American, as a citizen, what it means to me. What it means to me. And if enough of us to get together and determine what it means to us, we can get back to having a constitutional government again. So, with that said, I want to do a really quick review of the Constitution itself, of what we talked about over the last 9 episodes. We're just going to say what the articles were. So, Article 1 talked about the Congress and the two different branches of the Congress, right? The House of Representatives and the Senate. We get to Article 2, and it talks about the executive. And what was unique about that, if you remember, is we were the first country with the first constitution in the history of the world that put this executive in place, that didn't have a king or a queen or something of that nature. So that's important. Article 2. Article 3 was the judiciary, talked about the courts and what the responsibilities are. Article 4 talked about states getting along with each other and the federal government's role in that. Now, of course, as you saw, whenever we got into these articles and the sections, it seemed like every once in a while there was a section in there that didn't necessarily apply to the article it was written under, but it fits in when you read it as a whole. So we've got Article 4, which we said was between the states. Article 5 is the amendment process. Article 6, we determined, was laying out the ground rules, saying that this Constitution wasn't going to negate who we were as a country prior to that, as far as debts and treaties and things of that nature. And then Article 7 talked about how it was going to be ratified. So those are the articles of the original Constitution as written. I would recommend that you guys read them, make your own decisions on what you believe, and let's go from there. All right, so I'm trying not to get off on any rants because these videos get long, right? I want to keep them around 30 minutes a piece. So I might get into something as we go, but the fact is, what we're going to talk about now, the Bill of Rights, limits government just like the Constitution. It's not there to limit the people. It's not there to put laws on the people. What it's there to do is limit the government's ability to stifle the people, limit the government's ability to become a dictatorship, limit the government's ability to rewrite the Constitution to fit a particular narrative in a small period of time, right? So that's what it's there for. That's the Constitution, and that's the Bill of Rights. So all those things that most people think are part of the Constitution, which they are part of the Constitution technically, come with the Bill of Rights and the amendments after that. So a lot of the things that we consider rights of the people are outlined in the Bill of Rights. Got it. Okay, so you know me. I like to start off with something interesting. So let me get to a quick little video to get us started here. And I want to make it large enough for everybody to see. And here we go.
When you hear the word Constitution, what's the first thing you think of? Is it free speech? The right to bear arms? Or the right to a speedy and public trial? These individual liberties, known as the Bill of Rights, were not part of the original Constitution. Instead, they were added 3 years later. Why, you might ask? In 1787, 39 delegates signed in favor of the Constitution, while 3 others present, George Mason, Edmund Randolph, and Elbridge Gerry, refused because they saw a fatal flaw. They demanded a Bill of Rights. This concern did not stop the Constitution from being sent out for ratification. However, during this time, a quarrel known as the ratification debates began between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. It was argued the Constitution lacked specific limits on government power. In order for some states to ratify, the condition was made that a Bill of Rights had to be added. Following the ratification of the Constitution in 1788, James Madison took on the responsibility of drafting amendments that would protect our individual rights. By 1789, Madison proposed 19 amendments to the House. The House narrowed the number of amendments down to 17. Next, the Senate, with the agreement of the House, narrowed them down to 12. Finally, these 12 were sent on to the states for ratification. 10 of the 12 amendments were quickly ratified, and by December 15, 1791, enough states had ratified to authorize the adding of this list, known as the Bill of Rights, to the Constitution. Today, the Bill of Rights defines the rights and freedoms of the individual and is vital to the republic in which we live. It is a powerful instrument which we the people can use to defend our freedom, not only today, but for generations to come.
So interesting, right? We figured out that, or we know that the Constitution was written prior to the Bill of Rights, and that the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution because a group of the founders knew that there had to be more, that there had to be protections for the people from the government that weren't necessarily included in that original Bill of Rights. So, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about that. So I want to give a little bit of background on this. The founders, and mind you, once again, I told you I'm not an expert on this. This is stuff that I've read. These are history books. These are Navy required reading. I don't know if you can see the hat, but I found this hat in the closet earlier tonight when I was working. I was like, wow, crow's nest, VP-30. That was my first P3 command way back in the day. That was where I went to the primary flight school for being an engineer. And cool stuff, man. I didn't realize I had this old stuff still sitting around. But it makes me, once again, it gets me off on the tangent that I don't need to be on. But the founders' intentions were clear. The right to speak out against government was, other than the right to bear arms, the single most important thing they worried about. It says here, the right to speak out against government, including financing of pamphlets, broadsides, or other forms of advertising, was the single most important right they addressed, aside from possession of firearms. Some of the other beliefs they held included the declaration of a right to attain and keep property, so personal property rights, which Americans accepted even further by insisting on minimal taxation. And all of this, of course, had to be written down. And so that's where the Bill of Rights comes in, because they got the government, they designed the government in the Constitution. Now they want to expand on that and give those rights to people. So really, really important stuff there that we know. We have to know this stuff. And then we're going to talk about the First Amendment tonight. So I want to talk a little bit about freedom of speech and kind of the assault that we have on our freedom of speech these days. Once again, I'm going to try not to get off on a tangent. But the more you silence the people, the more the people feel like they don't have any other choice but to get out there and cause problems and get noticed. If they can't speak, if they can't speak up, if they can't protest, if they can't do it legally and peacefully because the government prevents them from doing that, hello barricades around the people's houses, hello King Inslee, and I get, oh my gosh, these websites taking down all the conservative speech sites. Boy, I hate to say it, but I feel like the left and the big tech is purposely trying to silence the conservative voice and drive them to that point where they have to stand up and do something that is probably not the best for them to do. And then they'll be able to say, see, we told you. Look at those guys. Look at those people on the right. Well, that's not who we are. But if that's who we have to be to preserve our nation, then some people are going to be that way. Listen to this. From the outset, the proceedings, we're talking about the writing of the Constitution. From the outset, the proceedings had perched perilously on the verge of collapse, making the final document indeed a miracle. When the convention ended, we talked about this with Ben Franklin, and he came outside and he said, "We have a republic if you can keep it." He knew that we were walking a pretty fine line. The important part was to get a constitution in place that would allow us to create this nation and move forward. And he knew that, and they knew that it wasn't going to be perfect, but it was going to be a constitution and statements and laws and rules for a government to become better over time. And that's exactly what we tried to do. There was something else that I wanted to look at. Oh yeah, let's talk. We're still talking about, and I don't know how I got on the tangent on the hat, but I was going to talk about religious freedom and freedom of speech and freedom of expression and this whole insurrection debacle. If that was insurrection, then what happened during the Antifa and BLM riots in Portland and in Seattle had to be a downright invasion then in comparison. So the fact is that the lawmakers felt threatened personally. So now it's a big deal, right? If it's you and I that get our store burned down or get beat up in the street or yanked out of our car and beat up, if it's you and I, the lawmakers are, oh, well, most of them were peaceful. If it's them that feel threatened, it's the end of the freaking world. And they have to drag it down and they have to make an example out of everybody. So double standard. But get this, we're talking about freedom of speech once again. Religion, especially Christian influence in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, were so predominant that as late as the mid-20th century, the chairman, and I can't pronounce this word correctly, Sesquicentennial Commission of the Constitution answered negatively when asked if an atheist could become president. So all this garbage about how religion wasn't part of the creating of our country, Christianity wasn't part of the creating of our country, is well, it's garbage. It's a lie that's been perpetuated over the last 40, 50, 60 years to convince people not to give up their morals, to live in the day. So yeah, it says, we maintain that the spirit of the Constitution forbids it. The Constitution prescribes an oath of affirmation in its essence in a covenant that the people which the president pledged himself to keep with the help of Almighty God. Modern interpretations of the Constitution that prohibit displays of crosses in the name of religious freedom would have been shouted down by the founding fathers. The Ten Commandments were in the halls of justice. They were in the capitals. They were in the schoolhouses. We are found based on Judeo-Christian beliefs and the fact that even if we didn't necessarily agree with each other, we had the same moral standard, right? And that's what free speech is about. It wasn't about separation of church and state. We're going to talk specifically about that point in some point in time, or about that issue at some point in time. Something else I want to mention to you guys is somebody out there, and I have to look it up, but I was asked to talk about how God fits into the Constitution. And so God is not mentioned in the original Constitution, in the original writings of the Constitution. And it's an interesting thing because its inference is there, where the words came from and how the people came up with it and things they believed in is there. But if you look at the state constitutions, I want to say 47, maybe 46 of the states all reference God at least one time, if not multiple times. And the ones that don't all reference a divine being, an all-powerful being that presides over our nation, hearts, and soul, so to speak. And so, did God have a part in this Constitution? I believe so. I believe so. Okay, so Bill of Rights. So the very first amendment in the Bill of Rights is what we were just talking about. So I'm going to read it. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people, to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. I'm going to read it again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress. All right, let's break this down. We got a few minutes, right? Because I don't want to go over 30, but this is important stuff. So Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion. So Congress cannot come out and say you have to be a Christian and this is the state church. That's why we left Europe, people. That's why the Europeans and Asians and sometimes even Africans and other countries, and to this day still come to our country, is for freedom of religion. So we do not have a specific religion. However, everything you read and everything you see that came from the beginning of our nation started with Christian beliefs and morals. Now, give you kind of an example of that. There is nowhere written anywhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence or even in the Federalist Papers where it says that we have to have this all-inclusive separation of church and state. One cannot exist without the other. I am going to tell you right now, without the belief that there's a higher power, that you're going to pay a price, that you have to answer to, then all of a sudden you have nothing other than yourself to live for and think about. The Founding Fathers knew that wasn't the way it should be. I don't need to get off on that. Basically, what it says here, though, is we can't say that this church is the Church of America, right? It also says, or prohibit the free exercise thereof. So why are we closing churches? Why are we telling churches they can't go to church? The Constitution expressly forbids that. Expressly forbids that. It's not a question. It's not a question. And yet that's part of the silencing of America. Or abridging the freedom of speech. So if I don't like you, I can state that fact. I can say why I don't like you, and I can say whatever the heck I want about why I don't like you or this issue or this concept or this restaurant or whatever it might be, right? And the beautiful part about it is, if you don't like what I have to say, you don't have to listen to it. And vice versa. You can say whatever you want. And I don't have to acknowledge it, right? That's the beauty of this freedom of speech thing. But when we stop that freedom of speech, and people lose their voices, that's when violence ensues. And I promise you, I've been an intel guy for the military. I've been around the world. Um, I've seen insurrection. I've seen oppression. I've seen freedom. And the left wants to muzzle you because they're afraid of your words. They're afraid of your truth. They're afraid that as more people speak up, they'll lose their power. So if they muzzle you, then you're less of a threat, is what they think. I promise you that's not the truth. You're more of a threat when you get muzzled. Abridging freedom of speech or the press. So the federal government can't say what the press can and can't print, what the press can and can't say. Now, there's been some laws and rules and regulations made regarding that over the years. But think about this. So back in the 1700s, when the Constitution was written, there wasn't very much free press going on. Everybody knew, based on the papers they read, who or what that newspaper stood for. Period. I mean, it was what it was. They knew that, so they knew that CNN was the left leaning, anti-American, in my opinion. Okay, I didn't say that. Take that back. That was the left leaning news source, and that's what they expected. And if they wanted left leaning news, that's where they went. Period. And that Fox News, say, was the right leaning. And if they wanted right leaning news, they went to Fox News, and that's where they went. So that was all to be expected. So this newism of how the media has to be this all-inclusive, bipartisan, unbiased. Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be a great situation, but that's just not human nature now, is it? So we know when we look at that stuff. But the media cannot be dictated by the government, and that's why, in my opinion, the government media, which is basically NPR, right, should have no government funding and should have to fend for itself, because they are, you can watch it, they are an arm of the left side of the government. They don't really go too much on the conservative side. Okay, so we shouldn't have that. Freedom of the press, or the right of the people to peacefully or peaceably to assemble. So that's getting out in the streets. That's what a million people did in Washington, D.C. the other day, was they peacefully assembled. And there was no incitement. That goes back to freedom of speech. There was no incitement on the side of the president to convince people to go to the Capitol and break in. As a matter of fact, I think if you look at the timelines, he was still talking. He hadn't even said, hey, let's all go down to the Capitol together and peacefully, non-violently let the senators and congressmen know what we think. You can listen to it yourself. I don't know where Nancy Pelosi comes up with the garbage she spews into her face diaper, but oh man, I got off on another tangent. Sorry about that. But peacefully assemble. Now, when it turns into violence, that's a whole nother story. But once again, you start silencing people's voices, and yeah, that's what you're going to end up with. Like it or not, it's the way the world works. All right, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Well, that's what the protests are. That's what the BLM protests are. That's what the Antifa protests are. That's what the pro-Trump protests are. That's what the pro-America protests are. I have an organization that's called Our America First. And when we assemble, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Our America First, and we're talking about letting the government know how we feel about what they're doing. Washington State is going down a very dangerous road, just like the nation. And at some point in time, we are going to have to go over to the Capitol and take that back, because we can't let these people just steal everything from us as they're trying to do right now. And we need to do that through elections. But what I think what's going to happen is the people are going to have to get to the point where they're so damn miserable and they've been taken advantage of to the point where they have nowhere to churn. And that's the only thing that's going to get the left back out of that rut they're in, that belief that the government has all power over them. So that's the First Amendment. Freedom of speech is basically what everybody thinks about, but there's really a lot more to it than that. It's the freedom to assemble peacefully. It's the freedom to say what you want to say. I'll give you kind of another quick example. If I don't like McDonald's hamburgers, then I don't have to buy McDonald's hamburgers, do I? I don't have to go to McDonald's. And as a conservative, that's what I do. I just don't go patronize that business. But it seems like the people on the left, if they don't like McDonald's, then boy, you are just the devil yourself if you like McDonald's. And they all have to boycott McDonald's, and they all have to go against that institution or that business because they don't like the way that business operates. Well, guess what? In America, if people don't want to shop there, they won't. If people do want to shop there, they will. It has nothing to do whether or not you like to shop there. And so I wish the left would get off that horse. So it talks about that freedom of speech, freedom of the press, big stuff. This is all good stuff. And then we can move on. We're not going to actually go over the Second Amendment tonight. The Second Amendment is really brief. Oh my God, really brief. But you know what? Without the Second Amendment, we can never guarantee the rest of the amendments, let alone the Constitution, is going to stay in place. And that's the sole purpose of the Second Amendment. So next video, which hopefully will be soon, I got a funny story for you. Somebody at work tested positive for the Kung flu. And he's not necessarily the most healthy guy to begin with. And yet he's probably just fine. The Kung flu is probably not going to hurt him very much. It hasn't so far. So that makes you wonder in itself. But so 2/3 of my coworkers are not allowed to come back to work because they were exposed to this dude. It's sort of like this. Man, I ran into this guy the other day who was exposed to this dude who talked to another guy who spoke to a dude about the Kung flu who saw an article on TV. Now we're all quarantined, right? So that's not part of the First Amendment, man. We have the right to assemble out there in the real world. And we have the right to do it under our own terms, as long as we're not violent. All right, and the Second Amendment guarantees that right. So we're going to get into the Second Amendment next week. I would say read up on it. I'm going to read a bunch of excerpts because it is so small, a bunch of things that I think make sense, and we're going to talk about why the Second Amendment is important and what the Second Amendment actually means, not what it's been bastardized into, and we will go from there. All right, well, I hope you got something out of the First Amendment. Once again, I'm not the expert. Go read it for yourself, and let's get together and make sure that we keep our nation of liberty and freedoms the way we want it, and free for our children and our future. All right, that's it for me tonight. Please like it. Please subscribe to it. Please share it with your friends. We had a video the other day that had almost 8,000 hits on it. It was actually just a Trump video, but just things that are happening out there. We need to get the word out before they shut us down. All right. All right. Well, you guys have a great night. Stay out of trouble. Don't violently assemble. Peacefully protest, right? All right. Well, God bless you. God bless America. And you have a great evening. Good night.